Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we get to look at the Vermont Legendary upgrade. I've been very excited to take a look at this thing alongside the Columbo Legendary upgrade. This patch, of course, bringing two very nice Legendary upgrades to both of these battleships. The Columbo Legendary upgrade we saw yesterday was very, very powerful. In fact, it's just a buff to Columbo in my opinion. Vermont sits a little bit differently. I like the design of this one better because it more changes the playstyle a bit, rather than just being a buff to the ship. Vermont has some very powerful guns, as it turns out, and it doesn't really need a buff to those guns. However, they have a very, very long reload, and that's what the Legendary upgrade here tries to address. We get a 10% reload buff here in exchange for our 5th upgrade slot. That's important. It allows us to continue taking the amazing American accuracy upgrade, but it gives us an extra 10% reload, nearly as much as the regular reload mod on the 6th upgrade slot, which does 12%. It also gives us 15% depth strike armament reload time and 15% to our AA continuous damage. But the key here is your reload. Notice here, this Austin is about to go dark. We're 5 seconds from being reloaded, and I don't think I would get this shot without the Legendary upgrade, without having this faster reload. Of course, Adrenaline Rush is helping us here, as I've already lost half my health. Yep, that is a blind Dev Strike. Well, kind of blind. It's a very obvious turn, I suppose, but still managed to lead that, and Dispersion cooperated. I will say I have tried this Legendary upgrade with reload mods, so stacking 2 reload mods, running Furious, trying to get a max reload Vermont, and you just don't really hit much. That 11% on the American accuracy upgrade slot 6 is too important. I really advise against running full reload here. Although I'll probably try it in another brawl mode, maybe ranked game modes. But random battles, nah, too much range, and we want that accuracy. Vermont, after all, is all about those dev strikes. Oh, so close. 6K. A lot of dev strikes in the last couple of days, I will say. Playing Vermont, very, very fun time. One of the best parts about Vermont, though, is its concealment. So we have to sacrifice that here. We no longer have our 12.6 kilometer detection. We have 14 kilometer detection. In my opinion, a much more balanced detection for this ship. I don't think any of these hyper powerful overmatch battleships should have concealment better than some heavy cruisers. I just don't think that should really happen in this game. So I'm happy if a lot of people start taking this Legendary upgrade and making the concealment a little bit worse on this ship. But I think it probably should have had that from the start, that 14 kilometers, and then forcing you to choose between like 15.6 or 14 kilometers here. But maybe a nerf for Vermont in the future, we'll see. But for now, it is still a choice to be made, as we don't get to take advantage of things like Brisk nearly as much, since now we're going to be a little bit slower, as Brisk allows us to be faster when we're undetected. Something the Vermont usually likes a lot. Yikes, that's nearly 50k into that Monty opening salvo. I think this was one of my best games as far as damage per salvo goes. It's very strong, though, to have faster reload here, but a lot of the time with Vermont, you're going to be holding your shots. I might hold them too much, to be honest with you, but I do think that Vermont values the slower, more impactful playstyle. So that's where maybe this Legendary upgrade isn't quite as good. Maybe you don't even want to run it, since you do lack that concealment. Something that battleships are very, very good at is killing cruisers when the cruiser is not aware you are around and looking at them. Of course, if you're spotted, much easier to know what you're looking at as the cruiser player. So if you can be undetected as a battleship, maybe you can get a nice sneaky salvo out. Whereas with this Legendary upgrade, you are going to have a more difficult time with that. Something to consider, I suppose. Broadside, Louisiana, 15 kilometers away. That's some nice dispersion. We're on 67,000 damage right now, guys. That is nearly 80k. Nearly a full health tier 10 battleship. Wow. You definitely want accuracy upgrade. And that's what Vermont does, though. That's what the current Vermont does. Keep in mind, okay? This is something that current Vermont is capable of doing. What you're going to see is opportunities, or you should look for opportunities here where I am shooting on cooldown, where I get reloaded and I'm instantly firing again. Those are situations where Vermont is benefiting from that legendary upgrade. Otherwise, maybe not as good of an upgrade as Concealment. It is a toss-up. It's something you have to consider. And I think that's really good. Something that the Columbo legendary upgrade really doesn't have. It's just better. And I think it's more interesting if these legendary upgrades aren't just buffs for people, whereas they're just different playstyles. Unfortunately, no Citadel there into the Devastation. How disappointing, yet still 33k. I am running heavy AP here, though, to be fair, so the damage output, it's massive. 95k to this Louisiana in 12 shell hits. Couple salvos, certainly, not one salvo of 12 shell hits, but still, that's a lot of damage per shell hit. Here, I want to show you the beginnings of this match here, where we might take advantage of the legendary upgrade if we're shooting on cooldown. This is the idea here. Are you waiting for salvos or are you shooting on cooldown? That's really going to determine if you want to run this legendary upgrade or not. And for the most part, I think most people are going to be holding their salvo, waiting for that perfect shot, especially as a Vermont that has better concealment when you're not running the legendary upgrade. You'll have to let me know in the comments down below how you like to play this thing. But it is kind of expensive for some of these legendary upgrades too, right? It's just shy of 20,000 research points, which is 2 line resets, unless you're getting the 2x bonus that comes up every quarter. Is it every 3 months? Something like that. Maybe 4 months. 3 months sounds more right though. But still, not everyone's going to be able to do that. So to have these buffs be, these legendary upgrades to be a buff to the ship, maybe not the best for the player base, at least for the newer players. As someone who's played the game a long time, it really doesn't matter because I can just use my insane amount of free XP and get through the Harugamo regrinds rather quickly and get these research points. But for a newer player, and you go for Columbo, well, you're just going to be at a massive disadvantage to a more experienced player. Something to consider there, where I'm not a huge fan of that. Here, are we going to shoot on cooldown? It's like 4 seconds we're gaining, guys, right? 36-second reload versus 40-second reload. So if I'm not shooting within 4 seconds of being loaded, I'm not benefiting from this legendary upgrade. At least on the main gun reload. There are some other buffs. Depth charge, airstrike, reload time is nice to have too, as well as 15% continuous AA damage. Nice to have on a ship with already pretty decent AA, defensive fire here. Of course, we'll see if this carrier rework ever comes through and if what that does to plane damage, we'll see. But for now, though, I do see this as mostly a 10% reload buff. And that can be very powerful if you're shooting on cooldown, but I'm often not. Here's another situation where I'm just not shooting on cooldown. I'm staying concealed until I find the appropriate or best target to go after. And it's not something I really considered while I was playing Vermont. I just played, I didn't really try to shoot on cooldown. I tried to take good shots. And I mean, 50K, nearly 50K on a Thunder at 20 kilometers. We're getting some very good RNG here. Vermont does not always do this. This is 2 days worth of games, by the way. And I'm playing Columbo in between. I'm playing some Henry in between, Buffalo. There's some buffs here to take a look at next week, but Henry might be back, guys. Henry might be back. Broadside Yoshino, 19 kilometers. We know he's going to accelerate, so we try to lead that a little bit. He might even turn in here. Now, front guns don't have the best dispersion. Yeah, we do miss, but look at the rear gun dispersion. As always, I think we all know, back turret, best turret. 26k, double Citadel, and he's gone, just like that. It's still the impactful salvos, though, guys. Here comes the Salem. It's all about hitting the right shot, not the DPM, I think, on Vermont. So, for me, I think when it comes to these 2 new legendary upgrades, it's going to be Columbo. Yes, you need it to play the ship. Vermont, you might not. Maybe at closer range, maybe in ranked modes where you want to have a little more DPM, a little less concerned about your concealment. Maybe that's the idea. But here is a great example of I wouldn't be spotted here. This Kremlin's spotting me right now. I wouldn't be spotted, and the San Martin here would not be shooting at me. I'd be saving HP, all that good stuff. Although, are we going to make use of our improved reload time to maybe surprise this Martin? That's an interesting idea. people might not be used to Vermont with a sub 40-second reload. Although Adrenaline Rush does some stuff there, Furious as well, which by the way, I am running. I'm trying to get that reload down a little bit. But maybe the Martin here decides to stay out a little bit too long, right? We caught that Austin earlier on. Now this guy's paying attention. Within, 5 to 10 seconds of me being loaded, he backs off. Smart player. So timing your reloads like this may not actually be that impactful. It's only a 4-second difference. So people going by feeling might just get behind cover anyways. It's still a long reload. It's still longer than the 30 seconds or even 25 seconds we'll see on some other battleships at this tier. He does, however, make a mistake. And that's another dev strike. But you notice I waited, right? I targeted the Kremlin, acted like I wasn't paying attention. I don't know. I don't know if that helped or not, but I tried to just target the Kremlin and wait and see what this cruiser would do. That was the whole idea. But I was holding my shot, not shooting on cooldown. Kremlin here, maybe going to go broadside. Kremlin's got some weird armor. Seems hard to Citadel them all the time at these medium ranges. So 13 kilometers, we should have the pen, especially if we hit the middle of the ship where the belt armor is the weakest. Yes, nearly a dev strike there as well. I was having a blast, okay? Vermont is just amazing. So even though I'm a little bit critical of this legendary upgrade, maybe not worth getting, not the obvious choice like Columbo is, Vermont's still just so much fun. You got to get this ship eventually if you're a Battleship player. It's it's too much fun, man. It's like the big club, the big bonk stick that you get in Elden Ring. It's the big dumb build that just hits things really hard. It's slow, it's cumbersome, it's not very agile, but it hits ridiculously hard. And that's a fun play style to have every once in a while. So here we go, Monty reversing at 17 kilometers. We are spotted here. Am I going to shoot on cooldown? Well, getting into a lot of engagements, you're already loaded, of course. So it's all about that second salvo, that follow-up salvo. I don't think this is enough to give you a reload time that's going to catch a cruiser that dodges your initial salvo. Hey, look at that, another nearly 40k. Very nice. Typically, when you have a battleship where you have a really fast reload, you're going to surprise cruisers who are caught bow into you. Let's say they manage to dodge your initial salvo, and then they try to turn away, trying to turn away in the time you're reloading. You can do that as a cruiser against things with about a 30-second reload, but something like Republic is always very scary to face as a cruiser, not only because of the overmatch, but also because you can't do that turn away during their reload time. And Vermont doesn't gain enough reload here to become that sort of threat. I do get a Confederate here, though, which might give us that option. Unfortunately, I'm not paying attention, and I'm going to die to the Azaccio Torps, or maybe the Columbo here. We're going to shoot on cooldown, so here's a salvo I get because we have the reload buffs, although that includes the Halsey buff. Columbo slaps us for a ton of damage again. Sap is insane, and we nearly take him out. Still, 250k, another dev strike. I was having a pretty good time. I was still having a pretty good time. The sap, though, guys. I mean, this isn't a Columbo video, but sap does so much damage at almost any angle, and it's like very permanent damage too. It's pen damage. Someone brought up in the comments below the Columbo video that HE damage, and especially the fire damage in particular, can be healed 100%. You know, sap is not like that at all. Very nice hit into the Freddy here. He was not flat broadside, but we do get a massive hit into him there. It feels good. Reload, though, is it going to let us catch a battleship? Because that's something Vermont can let happen, actually. Battleships are much more clumsy than cruisers, obviously, but heavy cruisers, battleships, sometimes can actually do that same turn away while you're reloading, and when Vermont has that 40-second reload. So here we get a shot into him. He probably could have angled a bit more in time, but I know to shoot superstructure on German battleships when they're angled, so unfortunately there's really not a lot that Freddy could have done there. Vermont does hit very, very hard. Broadside Lepanto. Again, we're getting into these engagements. It's all about that single salvo, and it's very nice to get these salvos, don't get me wrong. But I think the extra concealment shines through much more when we don't have carriers in the game either. I was fortunate enough to not run into too many carriers, so I think that's where I'm finding the concealment would have been much more valuable than the reload. But if you're finding yourself in carrier games, at least for now, planes still spot like normal, so a lot of plane spotting in the game is going to keep you lit a lot of the time. Where maybe you're not as worried about concealment because you're spotted all the time. I'd rather just have the reload buff, to be honest. But when there's no carrier, you can certainly make much better use of that concealment. So something to consider there, especially if the carrier reworks happen. Maybe they decide to listen to the community a bit and just remove carrier spotting. Maybe. Might be a little too hopeful with that. But hey, if they remove some carrier spotting, then I think this concealment mod is going to be a little bit better in those carrier games than it is currently, where if there's a carrier, I'm often just going to want this legendary upgrade, not only for the reload buff to our main guns, but that 15% AA damage continuous, that can't hurt, right? Maybe that'll help us stay alive. That's kind of my thoughts here with the Vermont legendary upgrade. It's a choice. It's a decision you have to make. It's giving you a slightly different playstyle, one that can be really powerful into closer range engagements, allowing you to reload faster, catching people off guard who are not used to a faster reload like Vermont can have now. It's cool. It's really cool. And the stock play style with concealment is still just as viable as it has ever been. So it's nice to have that in a legendary upgrade. It is not just a buff to the ship. Not that Vermont needed buffs. I do agree. I didn't really point this out in the Columbo video, and a lot of you rightfully did say in the comments that Columbo did need some looking at. It was balanced around Deadeye back in the day, and it kind of suffers because of that. Although I do believe the Sigma buff recently helps it a lot with, or I don't know if that's fully counteracting the changes to Deadeye or being balanced around Deadeye initially, but this is on top of that Sigma change too, so it might even be more accurate than it was with Deadeye. I don't know. I just think SAP is quite powerful and not particularly fun to fight against. It feels like there's not a lot you can do to mitigate the damage, especially when it is so much more accurate now. But back to Vermont. Let's talk about this thing a little bit here. The build for this ship. I was being quite aggressive, running super heavy AP and Furious, no fire prevention. Quite risky, especially without concealment, where you can use the very long immunity time on the damage control to prevent you from getting relit on a fire and then go dark with your concealment. So a little bit harder here to run this kind of aggressive build without the great concealment that this ship usually gets, but I tried it, and certainly those salvos were very, very nice throughout this video. 36-second reload is very nice, though. I gotta say, having that on Vermont feels very, very good. Sometimes it can be a little bit too long on the reload for Vermont, where if you don't get that perfect salvo, or maybe there's an aim bug or something, you're left sitting there for like 40 seconds thinking about that bug. So 36 it's a nice improvement. But again, into slot 5, concealment mod is very, very nice. I suppose a small benefit of concealment mod here on slot 5 is people have slightly worse dispersion against you. That's a feature of the concealment system here. So 5%. So ships are going to be a little bit more accurate against you. You might take a little bit more damage. I can't say that's going to be something I really noticed. Maybe. It'd be a hard thing to notice, but it's possible you take a bit more damage because people have slightly better dispersion. But again, there's bugs, there's aiming issues, all sorts of RNG in this game that I don't think that's particularly noticeable to just anybody playing the game normally. Over a large sample size, perhaps. But for Vermont, I think this is a very interesting legendary upgrade. I think it offers a cool playstyle. Faster reload on these guns is insane in certain situations, but it's not the obvious choice. It's not just a buff to the ship, and I like that. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.